Hey everyone, it's Dr. Joyce, board certified dermatologist, and instead of talking about skincare today, I wanted to share something very personal and share my IVF journey with all of you. I did post one picture back in December of 2021 when I went through my very first IVF cycle back in California. And since then, it has been radio silence, mostly to protect myself. In a large part, it was because I didn't want to go through all the highs and lows and put everything out there, because every disappointment I had, it felt like I was reliving that disappointment, typing it all out again and putting it out into the world of social media. So that was one thing. The second thing was that there's a lot of judgment on social media, as you guys know. I get so much judgment even for just talking about skincare and hair care. Imagine the judgment that women get for talking about their fertility journey. I've seen all sorts of crazy comments, and I did not want to put myself through all of that and face harsh judgment and criticism from people who know nothing about me and my family, and especially through such a vulnerable period of my life. Why am I talking about it now? Well, we're pregnant! We are 22 and a half weeks pregnant. It has been a journey for sure. And it has taken me a long time to even feel comfortable with the idea of accepting that I'm pregnant, because I think after so many disappointments and setbacks, you hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. And through the entire first trimester, I thought it wasn't going to work out. So now that I've had the anatomy scan, the baby's looking healthy, I finally feel comfortable sharing our news with the world that we are expecting, and we are so excited. So now that I have reached this point in my journey, I wanted to go back and tell all of you what has happened along the way. Mostly because when I was going through it, I felt so lonely. It was a really difficult time, and I felt like I had no one to talk to. And so I'm putting this video out there in case there's anyone else who's going through something similar and is looking to connect with someone or to know that you are not alone. That's why I'm putting this out there. And I'll try to shed some light on things that I've learned, mistakes that I made, things I wish I had known, etc. along the way. So our journey began back in 2021. So if you'll rewind 2 years ago, this was still when COVID was happening. I was still working at a hospital job. My husband was still working at a very, very breakneck speed in his company. And we had a 1.5-year-old. And certain things happened in our family that I am not going to go into more detail about in this video. Long story short, we had been trying to have a kid for a year, and I was not getting pregnant. And we decided to go see a fertility specialist who did the workup, diagnosed us with unexplained infertility, and we decided to pursue a round of IVF. Now, we knew at this point that we were moving out of the state. We had bought a house in Seattle, and we knew we were moving at the end of the year. However, due to my insurance changing and all sorts of hospital systems and doctors changing, I wanted to get it done before I moved, mostly because I had a great insurance benefit at my old job. So we kind of rushed to get that IVF cycle in. And I say rushed because at the time that I was going through IVF and all the shots, all the appointments, all the ultrasounds, we were also buying a house in a different state, traveling to Washington for multiple trips to view the house and finish up just paperwork and things that had to be done. We were also staging our current home in California, selling the home, moving all the furniture, gearing up for a cross-country move, and it was a stressful time, to say the least. And to this day, I still think that the circumstances of that time period, like how stressed we were as a family with all those things going on, I think that impacted the outcome of that cycle. It was my first time going through it, so I was new to everything. All the insurance issues, all the jargon, all the science really was very new to me. Even though I'm a doctor, it still was very confusing, and I was not familiar with the medications or with the procedures that were going to happen. And at the time, because of COVID, no partner could come in with me to any of the appointments or even to the procedure itself. Everything had to be done by myself because of COVID precautions. So it ended up feeling like a very lonely process. The other thing that made it hard was that at this particular clinic that I went to, I never got to see the same doctor twice. Even though I had a physician assigned to me, he was rarely there, and every time I went, it was a different doctor who would sometimes give me conflicting advice. I remember getting close to the day of the egg retrieval. One of the new doctors I saw that day told me I should just cancel my cycle. And then I saw my regular doctor 2 days after that, and he said we should continue. So it was very confusing trying to figure out who to listen to and how to make sense of the whole thing, despite being in the medical field myself. So at the time that I went in for the egg retrieval, things were not looking that great. The doctors were telling me that I basically had 2 cohorts of follicles that were developing. And I had been injecting myself with all these medications up to that point to get all my eggs to grow and follicles to develop. And they were basically growing at different speeds so that some of the eggs were ready to be harvested and some of them were too small and were just not quite there yet. And it's always a delicate balance to find the timing where you can maximize the number of healthy follicles and healthy eggs that you take. So in my case, they decided to do the trigger. I did my trigger shot, went in by myself for the procedure, had the eggs retrieved, and it was a very disappointingly low number that were taken out. And I remember a friend and I went through egg retrieval on the exact same day, and we both received just pretty disappointing results. And in that haze of recovering from the egg retrieval procedure and all the emotions of coming down from all the hormonal medications, I was just very anxiously awaiting the results of how many eggs actually were mature, how many of them are viable, how many of them were able to be fertilized with the sperm. And then after that, they were put into a little dish to incubate, how many of them reached day 5, and then how many reached day 6, and then out of those, how many were then biopsied and tested to be normal. And it was a crazy drop off at each stage. And it took a while to get the biopsy result, but at that point, I only had one embryo that made it to day 6, and that one was biopsied and sent off for PGT testing. And I remember getting the call actually on a 10-hour drive when my husband, my toddler, my mom and I were driving from the Bay Area, California up to Seattle, Washington with a whole bunch of stuff because we were moving. And I got the call from the clinic that unfortunately the one embryo that they biopsied was genetically abnormal. So basically nothing viable was gotten from that IVF cycle. At that point, I did feel pretty defeated because we had spent a lot of time and money on those injections, not to mention the emotional and physical pain that goes with undergoing an IVF cycle. And there's so many ups and downs, and it's all unexpected, and you don't have control over any of it. So this was really a setback for me. But I put it out of my head because we were moving to a new state, and I had way too much to do. So we kind of just put the baby making on the back burner. We tried naturally for 6 or 7 months, and then when I still wasn't pregnant, we decided to establish care in Seattle, Washington. And that's when I found my good friend, Dr. Laura Shaheen, who's at Pacific Northwest Fertility. And we had already been friends through social media online. And so I reached out to her and said, hey, can I be your patient? Let me tell you, choosing a fertility doctor that you can trust and who actually takes the time to explain things to you, like all the options that you have, all the medications that you need, that can make a world of difference. Because this process is rocky and shitty enough as it is to walk, and you really need a doctor who will be there to guide you through it, someone you can trust who has your best interests at heart. And Dr. Shaheen was that for me. So first we decided to take a step back from IVF and try IUI, or intrauterine insemination. And this is when you still take all the medications, the injections that help to develop your follicles in your eggs, and you're monitored by ultrasound like every other day. And when it is deemed that your eggs are mature, then you do a trigger shot, which releases the egg, and then it's timed where I go into the clinic and they put a small catheter up through the cervix into the uterus. And then it's not like a turkey baster method, but they basically shoot this prepared sperm specimen into my uterus and hope that it can meet the egg. And then you have the waiting period before you can take your pregnancy test to see if it worked. And unfortunately for us, it did not work. At that point, we decided to go for our second round of IVF. And we decided to do this with Dr. Shaheen at Pacific Northwest Fertility. And there's always a lot of preparations going up to the actual procedure. And it always took longer than I thought. So you start taking all these medications, and I want to say it was maybe 2 to 3 weeks of shots. And I was very anal about my shots. I wanted to do all my shots myself because I wanted to know when to expect the pain. I don't know why. I mean, all that went out the door when Matt had to do my progesterone shots. But I was very anal about the shots. So I would do them every night. I would numb my skin beforehand with ice, pinch the skin really firmly, inject, loosen, remove the needle. And I remember going into the procedure just feeling calm and hopeful. And Dr. Shaheen actually rearranged her schedule so that she could be the doctor doing my egg retrieval, which I really appreciate. And I just remember they were pushing in the fentanyl, and I felt this sense of, I trust you, and no matter what happens, even if it doesn't work, we'll come up with a plan and we'll find a way. So I received the results of that egg retrieval almost 1 year ago, and we had gotten a small number of eggs, so I wasn't very, very hopeful of the results. But in an unexpected outcome, all of the embryos that we ended up biopsying ended up being genetically normal. And so that was a huge shock. And after that, I was so excited because then I thought, well, we can get ready to do the transfer. And we geared up for the transfer. We did our first transfer in January. And silly, old, naive me, I didn't realize that even after you've gone through all this work, the IVF process, even after you've gone through the PGT testing, the biopsying of the embryos, even after you do all your shots to get your body prepared to accept the embryo, that there was a chance that it wasn't going to work.
On these videos because it's just we have so many of them now.
One, you're showing people that review them.
And so in January of this year, we did our first transfer, waited the 2 weeks before taking a pregnancy test. It was a blood test that was done at the office. And I still remember I was at church. The nurse from the clinic called and left a message on my voicemail, and I was standing in church. I had rushed out of the sanctuary when I saw that I had a missed call, listened to it in the hallway, and they just said, "We're so sorry, it didn't work." And I remember just the tears coming down my face in church, and honestly, I felt so angry. I just felt so angry with everybody, with my doctor, with science, with myself, with my body, and I honestly felt very, very angry with God at that moment too. I don't usually talk about religion on here, but it is very hard to talk about my IVF journey without talking about God. So here we are. And out of my whole IVF journey, that point, that failed transfer was actually the hardest part for me to accept because I had done all the work. I had already gotten through what I thought was the hardest part, which was getting the eggs out and getting good embryos. But yet, despite all that, it still didn't work. It definitely made me feel very hopeless about whether this was even going to work at all. And I questioned whether we should even try to expand our family. And my husband and I had countless conversations about this. And I remember at one point, my husband told me that we don't have to continue because his heart hurt seeing all the ways that I was hurting physically and emotionally. And he just said, we don't have to continue. I don't want to see you like this. And at the time, instead of understanding where he was coming from, I thought he wanted to give up. And that really triggered something in me as well. So I would be lying if I said that IVF doesn't take a toll on a marriage, because it does. It definitely does. And as the woman, you're the one going through everything, all the physical shots, the appointments. I mean, I've had so many ultrasounds at this point that by so many people that I'm like numb to them. But it does feel very lonely even when you have a supportive husband like I do, because he couldn't go through the things that I was going through. And so coming out on this other side of it, I am very grateful that Matt was as supportive as he was. But even as supportive as he was, I still felt lonely and unsupported at times. So it really does take a toll on a marriage. So after that transfer failed, I had a couple things lined up where I was traveling. So February, I was flying to New York, and then to Hawaii, and then to New York again, and then to New Orleans. And so I didn't want to tackle all the shots and bringing them with me on the plane and all of that. So I decided to just punt the whole thing for a few months, and I wanted to just try again for another transfer. So I still remember the day. It was April 10th was when I started shots again. It was the day after I got back from a trip to LA for my dear friend's bridal shower. I started the shots again to prepare my uterus for another transfer. And think about all the months of shots at this point. I felt like a human pincushion at this point, but I was very used to it. And we decided to do things a little bit differently. The first transfer we did was a natural transfer, meaning we tried to match the timing of the transfer with my own cycle. In this second attempt, we did a medicated transfer where we basically kind of shut down my own hormones and my own body's cycle and then gave it back through shots in order to time everything perfectly and have greater control. And this was important to me because I still had travel, I still had work, and so we really needed to control the schedule a little bit more tightly. So we did the shots April 9th. We did the transfer on my mom's birthday, May 11th. I think that was a lucky sign. I mean, we put this baby in on my mom's birthday, and 2 weeks later, we did the pregnancy test, and it was positive. The intramuscular progesterone shots were probably the worst medication I had to take in my entire life, not to mention just during the IVF period. The needle is very long, and it's a thick needle because this medication is in oil, and so it takes some time for it to go through. And lucky little me, I had an allergic reaction or something to the medication where every single day, 6 hours after my husband injected this medication into my butt, I would develop fevers, chills, be bedridden basically, and be so sore at the site of injection with a huge firm rock at the site of injection that I couldn't even walk. And this carried on for about 10 days before I told my doctor, I can't do this. Is there anything else we can do? And I had searched Facebook forums, I had gone down a deep hole on the internet, and I read that progesterone in ethyl oleate was maybe a little bit easier for some women to tolerate than progesterone in sesame oil. So I ordered progesterone in ethyl oleate with the blessing of my doctor, and that did make a difference, although the shots were still painful. But the shots themselves were not the sucky part. It really was what came after, the allergic reaction. Man, I was sick. Then after a few weeks, after we got the confirmatory heartbeat on ultrasound, that's when I switched over to suppositories instead of injections. And that made a big improvement in my quality of life. I feel like I'm just kind of like rambling on at this point. I didn't really have a planned out story that I wanted to tell to all of you, but I guess I just wanted to share that emotionally, going through IVF is probably the second hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my entire life. And it was this sense of loss of control, this sense of helplessness and hopelessness. It's like you're trying to be hopeful while at the same time guarding your heart from disappointment. And that's a really odd position to be in. You still have to go through all the motions, keep doing all the shots, keep taking all the medications, and just pray and hope for the best while still thinking, okay, I'm okay if this doesn't work again. Life will go on. It'll be okay. So it just was a very strange position to be in. And I have so much empathy for all the women, everyone who has gone through IVF in the past, whom I maybe did not support as much as I could have. Y'all are super women. Seriously, women are strong. I mean, we go through a lot. Our bodies go through a lot. And now as I'm seeing my own body changing, my belly is expanding, along with all the stretch marks, the dark spots that come with pregnancy, I just am in awe, honestly. I'm just in awe of how strong we are and what our bodies can do. So, to wrap it up, to anyone who's going through this process right now, my heart goes out to you. I know what you're going through. It is a really difficult time. And I found that what helps me is, one, finding a doctor that I felt like truly cared about me, that I had good communication with. Two, surrounding myself with a good support system that was my husband, my mom, and some very awesome friends that I could call and vent to and who shared their own experiences with me. I love you guys. You know who you are. Three, try to keep hope alive, even though I know how hard that can be. But when you lose hope, then everything becomes that much harder. All the shots, every medication, every appointment just feels like such a drag. So trying to keep a little flicker of hope alive through the whole process and not let it just get beaten out of you. And four, if you ever need someone to talk to, just leave a comment here, send me a message. I am open to hearing from you. I know how hard it is, and I'm here to support you just like others have supported me. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine too. You know, I didn't talk about any of this for 2 years and just kept it all inside me, went on posting on social media as if nothing was happening, and that was hard in its own way. So everyone ends up finding the right balance of how much to share, how much to keep private, but just know that I am rooting for you and I am praying for you and hoping that you get the outcome that you so desire. All right, now that this story is out there, I just wanted to say that I am ready to make some pregnancy safe skincare content and just pregnancy content in general. So let me know how I can support you guys, what topics you want to hear about, and of course, like I said before, if you want to connect over IVF for any reason, please feel free to leave a comment below or send me a message on any of my social media accounts. Thanks for sticking with me through this very personal video. It's something that I haven't really done before, and I appreciate you spending this time with me and for supporting me as always. Mwah! Until next time.